the goal of the work, besides the fact that I enjoy it, and my greatest enjoyment comes from the widest sharing, the professional value also is, I think it leads clients, it leads others to say, we want to talk to the person who created that. So for me, sharing it more widely makes it more valuable. Having a bigger quote unquote readership kind of builds the influencing power. And there's also a ton of time where I'll put something out, and then just as I've tried to improve upon the work of others, I'll see others improve upon my work.
Have you ever noticed that some of the best ideas come from unexpected places? Your next breakthrough may come from a leader facing similar challenges, but in a completely different sector. Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop. Join us as we explore how today's successful leaders inspire, influence, and connect with others. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board, who have teamed up to spotlight how great leaders and communicators are making their impact in the world. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. As a proud GW graduate myself, I can attest that faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. Today, we are fortunate to have Bruce Mehlman with us. With over 2 decades of experience in public policy, business, and the law, Bruce helps leaders and organizations understand, anticipate, and navigate political risk. He is the founder of Mehlman Consulting, and Bruce leads an impactful lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. that it seems like everybody knows, perhaps because of his quarterly infographic analyses, which are consistently picked up by national media and eagerly consumed by tens of thousands of readers around the world. We're going to talk about this breakthrough tactic with him today. Before starting his firm, Bruce served as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Technology Policy under President George W. Bush. He also worked as a senior leadership aide in the House of Representatives, general counsel to a national political party committee, and policy counsel to Cisco Systems. So he obviously understands how U.S. government works, and we're excited to get that perspective. An adjunct professor and board member of the Washington campus, Bruce frequently lectures MBA candidates on effective business government relations. He is a highly sought-after keynote speaker on policy and political trends, regularly headlining business conferences and strategic planning sessions. Bruce, we are so thrilled to have you with us today. Welcome to Chief Influencer.
Anthony, thanks. It's great to be here.
Now, one of the things that we're focused on in this series is that we believe some of the most effective leaders are more than chief executives. They're chief influencers. And as a government relations leader, I wanted to get your thought on the impact that you want to see in the world. Tell us more about that, particularly through the lens of the work that you do. And who do you have to influence to achieve that impact?
Look, it's a great question. I guess I'd start with when the itch to change the world was stronger. I was more likely to be in government service or in politics or campaigns, both for family reasons and because that's a hard pace to sustain. I started a bipartisan firm. So at the narrowest, my goal is to try to influence policymakers on behalf of the clients that our firm decides to represent. More broadly, though, I see the work that I do, while narrow on a client-by-client basis, is part of a broader macro shaping public policy during a pretty extraordinary time in American and world history. And so, it takes, you got to cover one of your eyes to kind of meaningfully appreciate it. But the work that we're doing is part of a modernization of the policy architecture that was created in and for the 20th century, but isn't necessarily adequate for the 21st. And that's the big discussion that's happening, even though it's narrow on a client-by-client basis.
You speak with these MBA students who come from all over the country who are part of the Washington campus.
So do you.
And I do too. And it's such a great program. And one of the things that I think that program is designed around is the idea that people in business sometimes think about government or Washington. It's an afterthought for them. And your message is that they really need to pay attention to it. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about the perspective that you bring to these executive and MBA students who come through DC as part of the Washington campus.
Oh, sure. Look, I love doing that. It's a lot of fun. I guess I have three goals. First, to your point, the whole reason the organization exists is to help future business leaders understand the risks and opportunities of government as a stakeholder. Too many ignore it. Number two, I both try to explain what's happening in the broader policy and political environment, because I also see these future business leaders as national and community leaders, and understanding what's happening broadly helps them be better community and individual leaders. By the way, it's also a great opportunity to kind of test out new slides and new ways to say things prior to hitting the road with paid audiences and boardrooms. But then number three, I have the added challenge that I don't know that you have, of every room I walk into with business students starts as a room hostile towards the business of lobbying. There are presumptions made, I think, fundamentally unfairly, that lobbying is some weird, arcane, backroom, smoke-filled, evil that happens to them. And I always say when I'm done, you're going to like PowerPoint and love lobbying. And I'm thrilled over more than a decade about the number of emails and DMs on LinkedIn of folks who say, I absolutely think lobbying is cool, and I now think maybe it's a field I want to go into.
Hey, if you could get people to feel that, I mean, I think that that's a huge achievement. And it's probably one of the reasons that you're one of their highest rated speakers. So congratulations for that. You mentioned lobbyists, right? Washington is full of lobbyists. Most people probably don't know a lot about lobbying, but in my experience, you're one of those lobbyists whose name everybody seems to know. And I think that's obviously in large part because of the quarterly infographics that you release, the slide decks, also the interviews that you do. I think it's pretty incredible that your slide decks have been reported on in The Hill. I mean, who gets media coverage for sending out research, but you have. So can you tell us a little bit about why do you do this? How did all of this start? And why does it work so well, particularly in a crowded media landscape?
Yeah, wow. A lot there to unpack. So I guess it started because when I do a presentation, I always enjoyed what my old boss at Cisco Systems did. John Chambers was the CEO of Cisco Systems during the tech bubble and beyond. Unbelievably dynamic speaker, amazing salesman, and he was dyslexic. And so one of the things you learned when you were doing briefing materials is lose the lawyerly 5-pager and cut it down to a 1-pager of bullets, which takes a lot more work. So what really matters? You can say it in 3 paragraphs a lot easier than you could say it in 1 sentence and be right. So I learned how to brief better, but I also saw that he was the only guy I ever noticed who gave a PowerPoint presentation that in my mind didn't suck. And the reason is because he took most of the words away. And what he would do is he would narrate either a graph or a pie chart or an illustration or something that kind of evoked the idea that he was then explaining with words. And I remember thinking, I want to try to be like this guy. And I'm still not, but I'm still trying. And so when I was at Cisco, I tried that. When I went into the government, I would do that with a lot of slides. When I started the lobbying firm, I kept doing it. And what I found is every time I do a presentation, I'd have a large number of the attendees email me and say, can I get a copy of that presentation? That was, I liked the way you organized the issues and the thinking, and, you kind of made it more of a narrative, and either I want to use it myself somewhere else, or I want to revisit and think about it. And so for maybe a decade, I was doing that. And I started sharing. If I did a presentation for you, I'd share my deck with other clients, but I used to try to keep it a tightly guarded secret. And every now and then we'd give one to Chris Saliza at the Post. And, suddenly you'd have that dopamine hit of a media, people suddenly were all talking about it and liked it. I was literally having lunch with Charlie Cook one day. And I said, hey, by the way, I do this weird kind of hobby sort of thing. And he's like, every time you do one of those, 7 people send it to me, Bruce, which led the light bulb to go off in my head of, rather than other people sharing my work, I should share my work. So that's kind of where it began. What I found is, first and foremost, I do it because I enjoy it. Some people play golf. My handicap's in the 20s. I like golf, but I just find I'm fascinated by history. I'm fascinated by politics. And I kind of like I haven't had the time in my mind to write a book, but I like the challenge of what do you want to say? How do you organize it? What's compelling? What's not? What are the data? Turns out the data doesn't prove things. So first, it's something I enjoy. Second, I find clients like it and appreciate it. And so, there's a lot of awesome lobbying firms and way better lobbyists than I am out in the marketplace. But this helped both me and I think helps our firm be, they're the firm with the guy who does the slide deck. It's a thing. And hopefully the Chief Influencer podcast, something that distinguishes your company as well. Last, not that I'd love to tell you I was this thoughtful. I wasn't, but I don't try to sell anything. I mean, obviously I don't go out of my way to dunk on clients because that's not a smart way to do things, but I'm not trying to carry water for clients. I don't have and if you want to learn more, here's the number, call your local lobbyist. It's for me, I just want to put something out that people who I consider smart and thoughtful agree. They don't have to agree with everything, but agree this was a good use of my time. I enjoyed reading this. I found it interesting and helpful. Or I want to talk to you about it. I want to hear more than I kind of want to hear the talk version of what you just published. It turns out it's wonderfully helpful for business, but this was much more of a kind of either a passion project or the world's lamest hobby.
I love that you kind of geek out and enjoy making this stuff, right? Because I think that comes through when you actually enjoy doing something. One of the things I'm wondering is, as you talk about, you used to keep it a secret, and then you said, hey, rather than other people share my stuff, I should share my own stuff, right? I bet there are other leaders out there who have great material, expertise, research, and they have team members or maybe their own inner voice saying, we can't do that. We can't give that away. And I wonder what you might say to folks like that, or if you've even had that opportunity to, somebody's said that to you and you've had an opportunity to share your point of view with them, because you certainly made a shift from keeping it kind of private to just saying, hey, whoever wants it. I mean, you probably have competitors who sign up for it, right?
Well, so not only that, yes, I do. And I'm happy to share every friend, competitor, anybody who emails me. I don't care who they are. I put them on my distribution list. I don't know, the large majority of people on the distribution list, but we've definitely had lots of thoughts and conversations about, with folks from, the VC and the money world saying this, you can monetize this. Plenty of competitors like, well, why are you giving this out? I just saw your competitor literally giving the speech where they took 6 of your slides and they put them on there with their logo. They took your name off it, but it's like literally it's your point, your words, your graph. And why are you quote unquote giving it away? I guess there are a couple of thoughts. I mean, first, my theory is ideally this isn't like Coca-Cola's secret formula. First, I'm not sure how many original ideas I really have. I think I'm better at kind of the mashup of finding 7 other people's original ideas, but one from tech, one from finance, one from geopolitics, one from, campaigns and elections, and somehow weaving them into a coherent whole. And I feel like that's what I'm better at. So I should start with the humility of, if I don't have that many original ideas, I shouldn't act like my work is more original than it probably really is. But I also feel like the goal of the work, besides the fact that I enjoy it, and my greatest enjoyment comes from the widest sharing, the professional value also is, I think it leads clients, it leads others to say, we want to talk to the person who created that. And if you want to go ahead and copy my stuff, it'd be harder for you to explain. You could explain what it means to you, but nobody is going around saying they created it. So for me, sharing it more widely makes it more valuable. Having a bigger quote unquote readership kind of builds this is called the chief influencer, but it builds the influencing power. And there's also a ton of time where I'll put something out and just as I've tried to improve upon the work of others, I'll see others improve upon my work, and I'll realize there's a little bit of you hit yourself in the head and you realize, man, I should have, so I did one called the Roaring 2020s. And then a friend of mine, Alec Ross, who worked for Secretary Clinton. I knew him at a nonprofit. He ran for governor of Maryland. He's an author now of a couple of really successful books. The most recent one was called The Raging 2020s. And he has his own background, his own experience, his own ideas, but I'm hitting myself in the head being like, raging so much better than roaring. Like, I can't believe I didn't come up with that. Thematically, a lot of the points he made and a lot of the points that I'd made earlier in my slide deck were similar of, we both see this as a fairly decisive decade where the policies that are the 20th century policies and institutions have to be reformed for the 21st. So, uh, as a rule to date, having it more widely distributed leads to more people seeing it, more people reaching out, more people signing up, more people inviting me to come speak. And I feel like more clients feeling like I am someone they're glad they get to work with. And that's, for the business, that's the core goal.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about the goals and just even results. So, I mean, you've amassed an extremely impressive following. And I know some communications advisors get pushback from their leaders about marketing and branding and communications efforts because the leaders want to know, well, what's the result going to be? How do I translate followers or eyeballs into success for the company? And so you mentioned, you're getting media interviews, speaking invitations. Can you talk a little bit more about how this approach has helped you and the firm achieve results and some of the things you've thought about and where maybe you don't even always care about that because it's something that, you are passionate about. But I think that is something that leaders sometimes struggle with. And I'd love to hear your thought process around it.
Did my partners put you up to asking what the hell is the value of this crap you do all the time, Mehlman? Because it feels like maybe they did. I, Look, I ask myself that question all the time. There's one in my mind, maybe more, but I can think of at least one client, but only one, where the path was I published something. Somebody in California who runs an association saw the slide deck covered in the media, read it, thought, hey, this is really interesting. And I think my association members would like it, invited me to speak, for a couple of bucks. So for the firm, I guess you get a couple of dollars when I get to speak somewhere. So I spoke to them. But then one of the attendees thought, man, this is awesome. Like our board needs to hear this. So they invite me to speak to their board. And 6 to 9 months later, they need a lobbyist to help with certain work. And we're the first folks they call. And it turns out the nature of what they needed, which was part environmental, part trade, or we have just 2 home run hitters on those topics. So it turned out we actually could be useful to them. It feels that's something that clear is more of the exception than the rule. Again, I feel like lobbying itself, like law, is a bit of a commodity. So all of us are looking for what makes us interesting and what makes us different. I tell you what makes us interesting and different is quote unquote our people, which is both true, but it's also what every other lobbying firm would say. And it's also true for every lobbying firm. So, in a world where you're always looking for some kind of differentiation, there are some number of my clients that, ours is one of 15 lobbying firms. Several of them include very famous former senators and members of Congress and other, really capable people who are super plugged in with the people running the world and running the country. And maybe it's just ego, but I kind of love the fact that notwithstanding all of that firepower, when they have an executive team flown in or they need somebody to go to headquarters, we get the call. And can you guys come because we think the way you brief is more useful than these former senators who are awesome, but kind of just like to tell stories as opposed to offer information and data in a way that's both relevant and actionable, but also a narrative and not just what playbook is already writing.
Yeah. So I guess, what I'm hearing is there's obviously some data to support the value, but at some level with these sort of influence activities, do you have to trust your gut or your instincts a little bit that that it's working, even though you may not have a graph like you do in the deck that supports how this, feeds the business, but you sort of know that it's a good thing to do it?
Yeah, look, the not quite quantifiable, but you hear from so many clients, hey, this was great, thanks. Can you add these people to your distribution list? Will you come speak to it? That even though I can't put a number behind that's without a doubt, okay, clients like it, they find it valuable, they're asking for it, they will ask when the next one's coming out. So you start with that is qualitative, if not quantitative. Again, there's also I think everybody in a professional services world is going to be most successful if they do the things they're passionate about, they're interested in, that they, that give them energy in the morning when they wake up and that they want to be good at or they want to be great at. So there's a ton of anecdotes and a ton of qualitative support for, I know clients value this. They've told me they value this. I can't give you a number that says, I should do X hours because there's Y dollars per hour.
Yep, totally makes sense. I want to ask, any leader has to influence a mix of stakeholders. And I think that's probably somewhat unique in your industry because, through your slide decks and your interviews, you found a way to influence the influencers. You have some pretty important, high-powered decision makers who subscribe and pay attention and follow what you're doing. And at the same time, you were working on issues that require influencing the public as well. So I'm just wondering, as a former government official yourself, and now, working with clients on government relations, can you share what you've learned about what works to connect with the public versus to connect with policymakers and other influencers, and maybe how that's changed over your career?
Well, that's interesting. I'm not sure I qualify as truly connecting with the public. I mean, it's true my stuff gets distributed and published, and I love every now and then you get like the email. I have this one, hey, I'm a high school history teacher in Portland, Oregon. I'd love to share this with my class if that's okay with you. And I'm like, that literally, yeah, I heard from some officials and VIPs and electeds and others, but like that was my favorite email of the weekend because it's just, man, this is cool. But it's not really what I'm aiming to do per se. I think in my mind, my target audience is a pretty narrow set of policy elites. And part of it is there are others. One of my favorite things that I've been able to do with this is sort of barter my way, even though my stuff's available for free. Some number of people who sell this sort of analysis or intelligence for Wall Street or for other businesses have added me to their distribution lists for free because we got to meet at a conference where we both were keynotes or otherwise just on email, mutual admiration, and they find my work interesting and maybe helpful to them. And so it allows me to read, Louis Gov is at GovCall. It's a Wall Street investment advisory firm. I don't know how many people know them or follow them outside of that world, but they're so interesting and they're so thoughtful, and they make me often, because they're looking at what's happening in policy and politics through an investment and a non-US lens. They often see other, to kill the analogy, other parts of the elephant that I'm not seeing because the trunk's right in front of me. And I feel like it helps me get a much better rounded, just like going around the country giving speeches, you meet people and you realize, Mehlman, you are an East Coast elitist Washington insider. And when you actually talk to real people, you realize I am not balanced or objective in how I see things. And likewise, when you see non-government relations, non-campaign, non-American professionals thinking about things, it helps you get a fuller picture. And so part of what I have always wanted to do is, Axios is brilliant. Playbook and Politico is brilliant. Bloomberg is brilliant. There's so many people, Ron Brownstein. I mean, there are all these great analysts. And so trying to figure out, well, how can I say something that's a little bit different, that's additive, that makes people scratch their heads, that maybe brings in some of these ideas that I saw from a different lane. I mean, Ron Brownstein's 1,000 times smarter than I will ever be on politics and campaigns and elections, but I guarantee I read more about technology than he does. And I bet I read more from kind of Wall Street analysts than he does. And again, I don't mean to run down somebody I admire, but, he's way deeper and I think I go broader. And so, then if there's a way for me to tie some stuff together, a big win for me is when you get lots of people emailing after a new deck. Would you add me to your distribution list? Or would you come talk to us about this? Because this is really resonating with the types of things we're doing.
And one of the things that I'm hearing that you've said several times, folks are getting this, they're passing it along, and then people are reaching out to you. And it sounds like, what we used to call word of mouth marketing, right, is a really important ingredient in influence. When we think about influence and, in government relations, for example, one tactic that you can use is, you can run ads and, you can try to get op-eds, but there's something powerful, isn't there, when someone else tells somebody, hey, you should check this out, and somebody signs up. It has a different cachet to it, doesn't it?
Well, look, I thought it was GE back before it blew up, but they switched from, how would you rate us 1 to 5 to they would ask the question, would you recommend us to someone else? And they concluded that is the ultimate proof of value that they were adding to their customers or to their clients. So it's similar. There is word of mouth, although word of mouth in the digital age is very different than word of mouth pre-digital. And so, I'm like anybody, there's a degree to which I would like virality. Just my rule is I'm not going to dunk on people on Twitter, and I don't want outrage virality. I want interesting virality.
Let's talk about social media, because not only do you use it to get your message out, but you must be paying attention to all the conversations happening right now around data privacy and regulation, and you have your finger on the pulse of that, as well as the ownership change of Twitter and some companies pulling their ad dollars from that platform. So I wonder, what advice do you have specifically for leaders who are wondering how should they invest their time and their energy into social media when they want to influence others to achieve their goals?
I guess I'd start with great caution. I think social media can suck a lot of time and a lot of energy and give you a very false sense of reality, because the percent of people who are very online is tiny. The number of people with or using bots or otherwise, you can get a very false sense. I mean, start with, if you're a teenage girl, a false sense of what people think of you or whether people like you or other things. But as a business leader, um, I would be very cautious about social media. Some people virtue signal and moralize too much. It leads to it leads to acting before you think, because to be in the Twitter conversation, you have to be rapid. I find almost anything that I do, I get better work if I get a night's sleep, if I think on it, if I ask other people for opinions and ideas. And so, for me, because a lot of what I do is content creating, and, it's my Twitter rules are don't dunk on people, don't be an asshole, share interesting information and data. I work really hard to unspin it as much as possible. This is the really hard, because, I will see a chart and I will want to then have a conclusion or even a goody kind of statement. And I'm like, unwind it. This is just healthcare spending per country among rich countries in 2021. Stop. Yeah, the Twitter universe is going to get into, well, this proves this or this proves, I thought the data was interesting. And so I try to make my feeds generally data that I've seen, occasionally my own data, charts or other things that I think are interesting, occasionally quotes from a Ross Douthat or a Peggy Noonan or somebody that I thought, Noah Smith, Matt Iglesias, who wrote something really interesting that, like, wow, Derek Thompson's one of the best. People should think about this because it makes you think about something in a different way. What would I want to read? And I wouldn't want somebody preaching to me. I wouldn't want somebody telling me the other side is evil. But just here's something you may find interesting with a really tiny bite of why you may find it interesting. It works for me because I'm in the business of information, ideas, and persuasion. I think for a lot of people in a lot of other businesses, be cautious. Definitely don't let yourself get sucked into the doom scrolling and spending, if you spend hours a day reading Twitter and your job isn't an extreme online job, it's not the highest and best use of your hours, which again, there's a lot I'm sure you get into, but it leads me to can you start each day with what do I need to get done each day? And what do I want to get done today? And nobody on that list says 3 hours of Twitter fighting.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like an important thing that you've figured out through various ways that you communicate is your voice and the positioning that you want to take. You've said several times you don't want to dunk on other people. You don't want to get into that negativity. You want to present information that you find interesting, but you want to do it in a way that's visual and makes sense to folks. And did you just naturally sort of have that voice and that point of view, or is that something that's evolved over time?
Well, I've never been in the, stab other people in the eye world. Although ironically, the one tweet that I ever did that I think is now up to like literally 10 million impressions was during the debate. I guess it was in 2020. I just tweeted Bloomberg brought a wallet to a knife fight. And for reasons I don't quite understand, within like 2 minutes, both Ron Klain and Donald Trump Jr. had both retweeted it. So it kind of went supernova. But it's not me, I've never really been in the arena. I've been kind of near the arena, but I've got a lot of sympathy for people in the public arena. They could make more money and have, have their weekends and their nights, and and maybe you agree with them or maybe you don't agree with them, but they're doing their best. And we've gotten this screwed up world where now it's, you can find a really good person like Mitt Romney and try to find a way to, rip him apart and ridicule him about the dog on the roof and the kennel kind of thing. I mean, he's not cruel to animals. He didn't wage a war on women. I'm sympathetic to a lot of elected officials in both parties who are doing their best. And yet, there is outrage can be monetized. And that's what's happening with fundraising. And that's what's happening in so much of media. That's the business of media. It's angertainment. And so as a result, for a lot of people, it's all about attacking. And that's it both. I wouldn't be good at it. I don't, it's one of those you do that, you take, at the end of the day, you end up with wanting a Silkwood shower. Like, I don't feel good about myself. Whereas I feel like when I say positive things about others or others' writings, I feel personally kind of better. And so it's that tiny dopamine, makes me a little bit happier. So great. Well, if that makes you a fraction happier, do it 100 times and you're a larger portion happier. It was not a trial and error by bad. The trial and error by bad, I found, is the conclusion that my most, if judged by the most shared, most interested, most liked, my best tweets say the least.
The positivity piece. We've done some research on chief influencers and folks who, are leaders who punch above their weight. And one of the 5 pillars that we found that they do is they elevate others. And we found that not only does it feel better, right? Because it's just kind of feels good when you shine light on others and celebrate them, but it works better because people react well to that positivity. And obviously, when you give somebody some positive, feedback, they may actually share it or something. Obviously, in politics, we do see some things that are negative tend to perform really well, but and that might work well from a campaign or from a negative point of view, but from a leader, that positivity seems to perform best if we're looking for long-term influence rather than just that short-term bump.
There's a ton of leadership literature obviously out there, and some extol the Jack Welch, fire everybody who's not top, fire 5% of the workforce every year to just kind of keep it fresh, and reward the winners but make pain for the losers, and there's some of management to that. I am really good, I believe, as a colleague for high performers who want to be successful, and I'm definitely not good for people that kind of need to be moved along. And I'm not great in my mind for people that need to be mentored and coached. I've got colleagues like Elise Pickering I've worked with for 17 years, or David Thomas, who are wonderful coaches and mentors, and and they bring people along. I find I'm definitely, I think I'm good at leading by example. I'm really good at sharing the wealth, the glory, the fun, the credit. And I try to be, and the best compliment I ever received was from an old Commerce Department buddy named Mike Gallagher. But basically the feedback was he felt like everybody he runs into all day, either people who report to him or people who are peers or compete with him or whatever, suck his energy, he said, except me. And he said, I was like the one, like, the just whatever running into me, I was the positive energy, which, that literally, it's, if you told me, okay, your work is done, what do you want him to say at your funeral? I'm like, boy, I'd love it if they brought that line out. And I really do try to be, whether it's on a personal level or professional level, I try to be the guy who absorbs all the negative energy and reflects positivity when you can, and if it means you need to go do an hour workout a day, or, and I think I try to be that guy. And I think to the extent I can, that is a reflection upon the fact that I just had a very fortunate upbringing. Mom loved dad, dad loved mom, did not have a lot of, I didn't need to develop a lot of resilience because of bad things. I was able to develop, I think, solid resilience because I've lived a very blessed life. Or at least my first 3 decades gave me a wonderful foundation to just generally be positive. People, for the most part, were good. Things, for the most part, worked out. I just tend to believe things, look at the American history, for all the things people are all stressed about. If you look at the 70s, if you look at the 1920s, the Gilded Age, like back in, everybody's always worried that, that the good times are behind us. And 20 years later, we learned that we were living in the good times. Now we think it's bad. And the arc of American history and the arc of human history has been one of positive improvement and gains. So, if you can just read a lot of history, you'll conclude there's a lot of good reason to be positive.
As you talk about history, I want to ask you about inspiration. We found that some of the best new ideas and the best inspiration sometimes comes from unexpected places. Obviously, what we're doing here with Chief Influencers, we're bringing folks from different industries together, and you interact with a lot of different industries. So I just wonder, where are some places that you've found inspiration, particularly for your leadership style and what works to influence others, that maybe outside of your core industry, maybe an unsuspecting place where you've gotten an idea or inspiration?
Yeah, what a wonderful question. So I guess I'd start with, I already tried to tip my hat a little bit on creative inspiration. It's folks considering policy and politics, but from the perspective as a tech writer or as a futurist or as a Wall Street analyst, or as somebody who's, looking at the global competition or military history, and there's a lot that one can see and one can learn, not only about what's happening in today's politics and policy, but seen through other people outside of your industry's eyes that give you instincts, but also, also leaderships. You mentioned the interviews, an unintended upside of a couple of different things. I used to do book events. We'd do them in our conference room. We'd get small number of people willing to come to our conference room at 4 p.m. The pandemic happens. I shifted to doing them online and realized I could now invite people all around the country or around the world. And I could to attend. So I suddenly could have more people attend. And I could also invite people that I had gotten to marginally know through the slide deck publication, but who weren't friends and I would never impose upon to come to Washington. So 3 weeks ago, I had Admiral McCraven, the dude who led the SEAL teams when they got bin Laden. I mean, the guy is a superstar. And he just published a book called The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, where it's a book for leaders, business institutions like universities, which he also led. But it was all sort of lessons from his background and the military and the history of great military leaders. And you can look there, you can look at business leaders, you can look at, just regular lives, it's all of us have these everyday heroes where, your kid goes to a school and one day at one of the events, they're paying tribute to to Mr. Tibbs, who taught for 60 years and they're giving him a chair. But you go and you realize, wow, like this person influenced so many lives in such a positive way. You don't have to, the people the VCs and the others who feel like if you're not quote unquote making a dent in the universe, you're wasting your life. I think that's silly. If you're a good parent, that's good. If you're a good neighbor, that's great. If you help the person put their, the older person or the person who appears to either be small or have a physical thing, they want to put their bag overhead in the airplane. Just what bums me out a little bit about the media culture today and about social media is they leave the impression that everything sucks and everyone sucks. And my impression is most people are actually pretty awesome. And there's just a small number of very visible online that get way undue attention people who have decided their path to fame is to dunk on everybody else. But I honestly believe most people are pretty nice people. I think it's why our elections work, because the elections are ultimately overseen and run by, little old lady retiree down the street who could care less what Tucker Carlson says or what Rachel Maddow says, who's just trying to give back to her community. And go ahead and, try to corrupt 10,000 of those all around the country of, little old retirees. You can't.
I love that. Some of the themes that have really come through today is, one, generosity, right? Don't keep things a secret, give them away. 2, the positivity, right? Seeing the bright side on things and seeing really that optimistic approach to sharing knowledge and how that helps other people and how you can put that positive spin on it. Again, it's no wonder you keep getting invited back to share your expertise with all these groups. You talked a little bit about, I think your personal philosophy and how that influences how you develop these strategies to influence others. And I just wanted to close by asking, you know, about the personal brand versus the professional brand? Because today, obviously, there's more overlap, gray area than ever when it comes to those. I just wonder how you've navigated that, both in terms of what you do now, but also, you were in government. So can you talk about that blend of personal and professional brand and your thought on that?
Sure. Look, it's a great question that I know a lot of leaders and business leaders think about and ask. At my company, you can kind of start with the cheat, which wasn't my plan. But when I started the company, since I was by myself, I said, I'll just call myself Mehlman Strategies, and we became Mehlman and Vogel, Mehlman, Vogel, Castagnetti. We kept adding names. We actually just came back rebranding because there's 7 partners. And so the choices were either Mehlman Consulting, which is what we are, because that's kind of what people always thought of us and shortened us to, or my partners who are awesome, but the name would be Mehlman, Rosen, Thomas, Pickering, Eastman, Aronson, and Robinson, which felt slightly long to roll off the tongue, although I've gotten practice at saying it. So, my personal brand and my company brand have always had a high level of overlap. But kind of by accident, knowing everything, I might have just picked something that wouldn't need to force us to buy new coasters and logo and t-shirts all the time. But it is what it is. And I'm certainly the last guy who has any reason or right to ever complain about that. If you read Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great and a lot of the, Built to Last and a lot of the best management books, he in Good to Great, he talks about the things that made that very narrow sliver of companies that were able to make the jump from solid in the marketplace to true leaders. And he and his team spent years analyzing them. And one of the elements was what they called level 5 leadership. To shorten it, level 5 leadership was CEOs who were all about the company more than themselves. So they, they subsumed their personal ego needs into the broader corporate needs. And so you didn't know a bunch of the CEOs' names, but you knew their business, and they lived and died, and they cared almost like a child, maybe more so in some cases, about their company and about the success of the organization and of the team. The good news when you're in government is it's always about something bigger than you. Short of a president, everybody is part of working for something. I guess if you're a chief of, well, like the best chiefs of staff, you don't know the names. Most people in the country don't know the names of brilliant chiefs of staff who are the reason so many senators can succeed. The reason you don't know them is because their product is the senator, and they're focused on, we want the world to see this as an accomplishment of the senator, not an accomplishment of the staff or the staffer. That's, you learn when you're in government, that's what great staffers do, is they make the Commerce Department or the secretary or the senator or the president shine and look great. And if you do that, it's this, not to torture the crap out of this, but it's the same as sports, where Michael Jordan didn't win championships until it became about the Bulls as much as it was. And he was still the most dominant competitive human being on the planet. But, his first 10 years, it just literally was a unstoppable force of nature, but not yet a coherent team. And the management had to ultimately build the right things around him, from the coach to the other players. But he also had to get his mind out of, I must dominate everything everywhere all the time, to we must. And I think for any leader, anybody trying to influence, we is going to have a way greater punching power than I.
And let me just follow up on that. How do you think leaders can manage that? That transition. I like the Michael Jordan example there, when the personal brand of the leader is such an important tool, maybe more important than ever, right? If you think about LinkedIn and how content really needs to come from an individual, or if a TV station calls, right, you can't send your logo, you have to send a person. And then on the other hand, it can feel like that might detract from the team, detract from the company. And so obviously you've found a great balance of doing that. And I wonder if you could just share advice for other leaders who might be trying to figure out how to navigate that with their team, so they are leveraging their personal brand for influence, but they aren't just making it all about themselves.
I guess I might say take an all of the above approach and figure out what works for you and your organization and try to exploit that more. Obviously, whenever possible, the greater glory of the we makes for a larger organization, a better team, a more successful program. And so it's including others within the ideation, within the building of it, and giving others credit when things that the team put together were successful, to me, are the core. You're right. At some point, somebody's the lead singer in front of the microphone and required to do it. But the band was Queen with Freddie Mercury, and he didn't do as well, at least according to the movie, when he went off on his own. Um, I do my best to try. At the end of the day, the slide stuff is nice and fun. The speaking stuff is nice and the fun, but it's a minuscule amount of the success of my law firm. It's Nicole DeStefano and Rosemary Gutierrez and Dean Hinkson and Helen Tolar and just a whole lot of really talented people we have doing the work with clients all day, every day, who are the reason that the business succeeds. And frankly, the thing that gives me the flexibility and the freedom to try to, throw in something that nobody has ordered in the restaurant, but everybody's glad when it arrives at the table, and it's, I think for the leader, if you need to be the front person, that's great, but you need to share the load and share the wealth and share the glory and share the fun. And if you do that, people hopefully don't resent you for playing a necessary role. And they certainly don't resent you when the front guy gets the tomato thrown in his face.
I love that. You're the amuse-bouche, that extra piece that the chef brings out, it sounds like. This has been a great conversation. It's a great way to wrap it up today. Really appreciate your time. Bruce, can you tell everyone where they can find you if they want to learn more, follow you, and of course, get your quarterly analyses?
Sure. Look, you can find me on LinkedIn, Bruce, Mehlman. I'm happy to link in with anybody. If they mention they're a friend of Anthony's, I will do it for free. Or otherwise, I will do it for free because that's how LinkedIn works. On Twitter, I'm at BPMEHLMAN. My pinned tweet any quarter is my most recent analysis. If you go to the Mehlman Consulting website under thought leadership, there's infographics, there are links to the video interviews that I've been doing. So we certainly don't, this is not a well-kept secret. We're doing our best to share it with everybody. And what you'll find is, if you can make it to the end of a slide deck, I have my email, and I say, email me personally and ask to sign up for the slide decks. And I'm happy to add anybody to my distribution list. I try to make it a little bit, I want to have people get through so they know what they're signing up for. It should be both opt-in, but also, it's just like it's a nice little ego hit when people sign up. It's a bit of an ego blow when people, say unsubscribe me, and I'm over it. I get over it. No reason to have people receive something that they haven't checked out and road tested and concluded they like.
That's great. Well, we are grateful that you no longer keep it a secret. I find whether it's the interviews you do or the slide decks, they are all so valuable. And we really appreciate you taking time to share your thoughts for other leaders today on Chief Influencer. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chief Influencer, a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board. If you know a leader who should be featured as a Chief Influencer, please nominate them at chiefinfluencer.org. For show notes and more, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn. Until next time,